The morning of my wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Emma's dress hung beside the window like a ghost in waiting, sunlight catching the intricate lace like it was glowing. I stood in the mirror adjusting my tie for the 5th time, trying to look like the kind of man who deserved someone like her. There was a knock at the door, 3 short raps, deliberate and familiar. My stomach tightened before I even turned around. "Jason," my father said as he stepped inside the room, flanked by 2 groomsmen he barely knew. He was wearing a tux too dark and too expensive, the kind of thing he wore to courtrooms and charity galas, not to weddings. He was holding something, a leather portfolio. Rich, mahogany brown. He held it like a priest with a holy book, cradled in both hands. "I wanted to give you something special," he said loud enough for the others to hear. "A gift for the man you've become." The room grew quiet. I hated when he did this, perform for others like he was the patriarch in some family epic, the benevolent leader bestowing wisdom and gifts. Everyone clapped politely as I accepted the portfolio. It was heavier than it looked. "It's not just any portfolio," he added with a smug little smile. "Open it when you get a chance. It'll help guide your future." I nodded, trying to look touched. But the moment the door closed behind him, the weight in my hands felt less like a gift and more like a set of chains. Emma walked in a few minutes later, hair pinned back, cheeks flushed with excitement. Her smile faded when she saw my face. "What is it?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. I told her the truth. I didn't know, but I didn't like how it made me feel. We got married that afternoon in a blur of emotion and ceremony. Emma looked like a dream, and I told myself I would deal with the portfolio later. The weight of it sat in the corner of the bridal suite like a quiet threat, but I refused to let it steal the joy from our day. We left for our honeymoon the next morning. Paris. Emma's dream trip. I shoved the portfolio into my suitcase because I didn't want to leave it behind, but I didn't dare open it either. We agreed, no stress, no distractions. Just us. But it was there, every night. I'd see it resting on the table in the hotel room, leather catching the glow from the city lights. Emma would catch me looking at it, and I'd pretend I wasn't. It became a silent third party in our trip. By the end of the week, I was more tense than relaxed. Emma finally said, "Jason, whatever's in that thing is clearly living rent-free in your head. We have to open it." I nodded. "When we get home." I didn't know what scared me more, the contents of the portfolio or the realization that my father still had the power to shake me. Even on the best day of my life, we'd barely been home for 20 minutes before Emma pulled the portfolio from my suitcase and dropped it onto the dining table like it was a grenade we could finally defuse. "Come on," she said, already slicing through the embossed leather straps. "Let's see what Daddy Dearest thinks is an appropriate wedding present." I sat across from her, heart pounding. A part of me still hoped it was a misguided gesture, maybe some career advice or old family photos. But as the flap peeled open and she slid out the contents, all hope died. It was thick, at least 40 pages of legal jargon, tabs marking signatures, initials, and highlighted sections. Emma flipped through them like a pro. Her background in corporate communications made her more familiar with contracts than I ever was. But I knew enough to read the words printed on the title page: Durable Financial Power of Attorney, Jason R. Miller. "What the hell?" she muttered, scanning faster. "What does it say?" I asked, voice thin. Emma exhaled. "It gives your dad full legal authority to act on your behalf for anything involving your finances, property, debts, and Jesus, even your digital assets. It's worded so broadly it could let him access anything with your name on it." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Why would he want that? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out a separate envelope that had been tucked into the back of the portfolio. My name was scrawled across the front in shaky cursive, from Eleanor, my grandmother. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a letter written in blue ink, dated 3 months before she passed. "Jason, if you're reading this, it means your father has found a way to make his move. I tried to protect you the best I could. The money from the lake house sale, the offshore account, even the safety deposit box in Denver, it's all part of the trust I've left in your name. You must not, under any circumstances, sign anything he gives you without legal counsel. He has always seen you as a vessel for access. You're not that. You are more. Protect your future. I love you, and I trust you'll do what's right. Grandma Ellie." I stared at the paper, breathless. I hadn't even known there was an inheritance. Emma reached across the table and held my hand. "Jason, she left you something. Something big." I nodded, dazed. She must have known he'd try to get it. Emma kept flipping through the documents until she found the line. "Look at this," she said, pointing. It references any present or future financial holdings, including but not limited to declared and undeclared estate transfers, inheritance holdings, and legacy disbursements. That's not normal language. He knew. My stomach sank. My father hadn't just guessed. He'd known about the inheritance, probably for years, and waited until the perfect moment to strike, when I was emotionally distracted, overwhelmed, and desperate to believe in his approval. Emma leaned back, furious. He wasn't giving you a gift. He was laying a trap. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Then we need to find someone who can help us dismantle it. Emma didn't hesitate. Your grandmother's lawyer. Patricia Winters, right? I nodded slowly. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral, but I remembered how fiercely protective she was of Eleanor's wishes. Yeah, Patricia. If anyone can tell us what's really going on, it's her. And just like that, the fear turned into resolve. For the first time since I'd unwrapped that cursed leather portfolio, I wasn't alone. Emma and I were a team. And now, it was war. Patricia Winters' office sat at the edge of downtown, wedged between a rundown bookstore and a gourmet dog bakery. The sign on her door was plain. Winters Law, Estate, and Trust. No frills, no fancy fonts. Just the name of a woman who'd once promised my grandmother that her legacy would be safe. Patricia greeted us herself, silver hair tied back, posture like a soldier. She hadn't aged much since Eleanor's funeral. If anything, she looked sharper. Her handshake was firm. I've been expecting this, she said simply. That chilled me more than anything. Inside, her office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. She offered us water, but didn't wait before pulling out a thick file from her cabinet. Your grandmother anticipated this exact move, she said, laying the file on her desk. After her passing, I received instructions to notify you only if your father initiated any legal maneuvering related to your finances. I've been monitoring public filings since. Emma leaned forward. And he has, hasn't he? Patricia nodded. Twice. Minor probes, requests for banking information, a background check on an offshore firm Eleanor used, and even an informal meeting request with me. I declined. I swallowed hard. Why would he do all that behind my back? Patricia didn't hesitate. Because he believes you're too passive to stop him. The words stung, but they weren't wrong. Until now, I had been passive. I'd let him control every room he walked into, let him define the terms of our relationship, even our silences. I was his son, and sons were meant to obey. Not anymore. I want to lock everything down, I said. Whatever it takes. Patricia looked pleased. Then here's the plan. We make you legally invisible. She laid out the structure of an irrevocable trust, one that would move all of the inheritance assets into a protected structure under Jason's exclusive control, with no ability for anyone, including himself, to dissolve it without external oversight. It was the legal equivalent of building a fortress with a moat and flamethrowers. There's risk, she added. Once this is done, it's permanent. But it also means your father can't touch a cent, even if he tries to manipulate you into signing later. Emma nodded. Do it. Patricia smiled for the first time. I'll draw up the paperwork. We'll have it ready in 72 hours. In the meantime, you need to brace for the backlash. She wasn't kidding. Within a week, the call started. My mother left voicemails, her tone drenched in forced warmth and passive guilt. My brother Tyler sent vague texts about how family means trusting each other. Even my cousin Megan tagged me in a Facebook post about sons who forget who raised them. My father, of course, said nothing. But I knew the silence was just the inhale before the strike. Emma and I stopped answering calls. We shut off social media. And every time I doubted myself, I reread Eleanor's letter. He sees you as a vessel for access. You're not that. I began to believe her. By the time Patricia filed the paperwork, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood, control. I was no longer waiting for his approval or dodging his disappointment. I was building a wall he could never scale. Emma poured us champagne that night, even though it wasn't a celebration. It's a declaration, she said, of independence. And so, the Cold War began, not with screaming or slamming doors, but with silence and steel. It started with a text from my mom. Family dinner this Saturday. Everyone's coming. Dad wants to clear the air. Don't be dramatic. I stared at the message for a long time before passing the phone to Emma. She read it twice, then looked at me. This is a setup. Obviously, I muttered. It's too public, too soon. Emma stood at the kitchen counter, arms crossed, tapping her foot. They're expecting you to show up emotionally worn down, overwhelmed by guilt. That's why they're doing it now, before Patricia finishes transferring the trust paperwork. We both knew my father didn't care about reconciliation. He wanted a signing ceremony. Something public, with witnesses, to pressure me into surrender. A dinner table full of relatives would be the perfect audience for his performance. I called Patricia immediately. "He's playing the optics," she said, unsurprised. "If you sign in front of family, he wins. If you resist, he'll frame you as the ungrateful son." "Then we need a better script," Emma said. And so we built a countertrap. Patricia offered to provide notarized documentation of the newly created Eleanor Miller Trust. Not just a legal maneuver, an undeniable statement of ownership and autonomy. It wouldn't just block him legally, it would expose his manipulations to anyone watching. "Do you trust anyone in that room to take your side?" Patricia asked. I thought for a moment. Maybe Aunt Cynthia, my mother's older sister. She and Eleanor had always been close, and I remembered her looking visibly uncomfortable at the funeral when my father gave his bizarre eulogy that barely mentioned Grandma. Cynthia had sent me a handwritten note afterward, short, but kind. Emma sent her a private message. "If you're attending Saturday's dinner, I think it's time we all had some truth on the menu." Cynthia responded with a single sentence, "I'll be there. And I'll be listening." The next few days were pure tension. Emma helped me rehearse responses, tone, eye contact. Not to argue, but to stay grounded. We made a pact. No matter what happened, we wouldn't raise our voices. We wouldn't defend ourselves. We would state facts. Calmly. Publicly. Saturday night came fast. We arrived at the steakhouse 5 minutes late. Just enough to create unease. The private room was filled with familiar faces, Tyler, my mom, cousins I hadn't seen in years, and of course, my father at the head of the table. He stood as we approached, smiling broadly. "There he is," he said, arms open as if we were long-lost friends. "Let's sit. We've got something to go over." On the table in front of him, the leather portfolio. Pristine. Waiting. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as we sat. Emma squeezed my knee under the table. I looked around the room. Every face turned toward me, expectant. Except Cynthia's. Hers looked wary. Like she already knew. "Jason," my father began, "I thought we could finalize the document I gave you. No pressure, of course. Just good to handle things with family as witnesses." He passed the portfolio toward me. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled out a crisp folder from my coat pocket and placed it on the table in front of me. "The Eleanor Miller Irrevocable Trust," I said. "Fully funded. Legally binding. Notarized as of yesterday." The room went still. My father blinked. "What's this?" Emma leaned forward. "It means Jason is no longer accessible to your manipulations." Then Aunt Cynthia cleared her throat. "Before Eleanor passed, she told me she was afraid you'd do this. Robert," she said quietly. "She warned me. And she was right." For once, my father had no words. And dinner hadn't even been served. You could have heard a pin drop. My father's hand froze halfway across the table, still resting on the portfolio like it had just slipped through his fingers. He opened his mouth once, then closed it. Behind him, a waiter stood awkwardly at the doorway with a tray of appetizers, unsure whether to enter. "I think we'll need a few more minutes," Emma said to the waiter without looking away from my dad. The door closed, and we were back in the pressure cooker. My father finally let out a soft chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. "Jason," he said, slow and measured, "I'm not sure you fully understand what this document means. These kinds of trusts are completely legal and binding," I interrupted. "Patricia Winters prepared it. You remember her, don't you? The lawyer you tried to push out after Grandma's funeral." A few heads turned. Tyler looked confused, maybe even scared. My mom stared at her plate, red-faced, clearly in on the ploy, but not the unraveling. "I didn't push anyone," he said sharply, his mask cracking. "I was protecting our family from bad decisions." I leaned back in my chair. "No, you were protecting your access. You assumed I'd be too polite, too stupid, or too broken to stop you. But that ends now." He looked like he wanted to speak again, but Aunt Cynthia cut in. "I watched Eleanor cry over what you'd become, Robert. I stayed silent too long. But tonight? No more." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't back down. "You used fear as your language. Even now, you came here expecting control, not conversation." Emma passed the trust folder down the table to Tyler and Megan, who glanced through it as if trying to decipher a map they didn't know existed. I caught Tyler's eye. He looked devastated. My stomach twisted a little. "I don't want anything from you," I said to my father. "Not money, not power, not even peace. I just want distance. I want a life where I don't wake up waiting for your next move." "You ungrateful little," he started. rising from his chair. "Sit down," my mom snapped, surprising everyone. "Just sit down, Robert. You've already lost." That hit harder than anything else said that night. He sat, and for once, he didn't speak again. We didn't stay for dinner. Emma and I stood, thanked Aunt Cynthia for her courage, and left the room in stunned silence. No screaming, no slamming doors, just the quiet crumbling of a decades-long performance. In the parking lot, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since childhood. "Do you feel free?" Emma asked. I nodded slowly. "Not yet, but I feel something I never have before." "What's that?" I looked up at the night sky. "Untouchable." When we got home, I put the leather portfolio into a box with my old report cards and family photos. Not out of nostalgia, but because it was finally just an object again. A relic. Nothing more. We opened a bottle of wine and toasted not to victory, but to clarity. The war was over. And I hadn't just won, I'd ended it. The silence that followed was almost eerie. For 2 days, nothing. No calls, no texts, not even one of my mom's signature guilt-laced emails. I knew better than to think it was over, but the pause felt like the deep breath before a storm. Then the messages started. Not from my father. From my mother. "Your father hasn't eaten since Saturday. You've humiliated him in front of the whole family. This isn't who you are, Jason." Emma read each one out loud, eyebrows raised, voice dripping with sarcasm. "So now you're the abuser?" I shook my head, disgusted but unsurprised. This was the pattern, emotional inversion. He was the one who tried to legally hijack my future, but now he was the wounded patriarch, and I was the reckless son who'd burned the bridge. Then came a message that made me stop cold. It wasn't from my mom. Or my dad. It was from Tyler. "Can we talk?" I messed up. Bad. He showed up an hour later. Emma stayed in the kitchen, eavesdropping with a protective glare while I met him in the living room. He looked ruined. Pale, thinner than I remembered. I sunken. Not the cocky younger brother I'd grown up with, the one who used to brag about his crypto pics and his networking genius. "I didn't know the trust thing," he said right away. "I mean, I knew Dad wanted to get control of your stuff. He said you were being irresponsible. He made it sound like he was helping you." "Did you help him?" I asked. Tyler nodded slowly, ashamed. "I told him you'd inherited something. I saw the letters Grandma sent you when we helped pack up your apartment after the funeral. I didn't read them, but I told him there were envelopes. He figured it out from there." I closed my eyes. "That's how he knew," I said quietly. "I'm so sorry, man," Tyler said, voice breaking. "I didn't think he'd use it like this. I thought he was just being Dad, controlling, but not evil." I let him sit in that silence. I wanted him to feel it. Then he dropped the second bomb. "I'm broke, Jay. I invested in a startup that tanked. I owe over $100,000 in loans, and Dad said he'd cover it if I got closer to you again." "So you came here for money?" Emma called from the kitchen. Tyler looked up, startled. "No, I mean, not like that. I came to cause. I need help, but not from him. Not anymore." I studied his face, trying to separate the brother I grew up with from the one who betrayed me. For once, I saw him clearly, not as the golden child, not as Dad's pawn, but as someone who was also trapped in the same web. Just deeper. "I'm not writing you a check," I said, "but I'll help you rebuild. I'll pay for you to meet with a financial advisor, and I'll help you get into therapy." His eyes widened. "Seriously?" Emma walked in and sat beside me. "Seriously. But this is your last chance to be honest with yourself. We're not rescuing you. We're inviting you to rescue yourself." Tyler sat back, stunned. "Thank you. I don't deserve this." "No," I said. "You don't. But that's what grace is. Grandma believed in second chances. I'm trying to do the same." As he left that night, I felt something shift, not forgiveness exactly, but release. Emma curled up next to me on the couch. "You think he'll actually change?" "I don't know," I said. "But I do know this. I'm not carrying anyone else's secrets anymore. That was Dad's game. I'm rewriting the rules." She smiled. "You already have." By spring, something rare settled over our lives. Peace. Real peace, not the kind bought with avoidance or silence, but the kind you earn through fire. The trust was fully active. Emma and I bought a modest home outside the city. Nothing flashy, just ours. No strings. No shadows. We planted a Japanese maple in the front yard. "For Grandma," Emma said. "So something strong grows where something strong once stood." Tyler started therapy. True to his word, he showed up twice a week and stuck with the financial counselor Patricia referred. It wasn't a miracle cure, but he was trying more than I ever thought he would. He sent me texts after sessions, things like didn't realize how much of Dad's voice is still in my head. We even had lunch together once, no money talk, no guilt. Just two brothers trying to figure out who they were without the family script. In June, we launched the Eleanor Miller Scholarship Fund, a small initiative through a local community college to support first-generation students in creative writing and the arts. Grandma would have loved it. Every dollar came from the inheritance she fought to protect. It felt right, like her story was finally being honored, not exploited. Then came the baby shower. No, not ours, not yet. Tyler's girlfriend, Marissa, was expecting, and he invited us to their co-ed baby shower. We almost didn't go. The invite list included both my parents. But Emma said something that stuck with me. This isn't about them anymore. It's about the world you're building. Show up as the man you are now, not the boy you tried to control. So we went. The shower was held at a friend's backyard garden. Paper lanterns, iced tea in mason jars, acoustic guitar covers playing from someone's phone. It was disarmingly normal. My father was already there when we arrived. He stood near the lemonade table, surrounded by a few people I didn't recognize. His posture was stiff. He spotted me and froze. I walked up, not to him, but to Tyler. "Hey," I said, hugging him. "Congratulations, man." "Thanks," he grinned. "You actually came. Wouldn't miss it." Then, something strange happened. I turned back and faced my father. No fear. No tension. No inner child hoping for approval. Just clarity. "Hi, Dad." He nodded, hesitant. "Jason, I want to be clear about something," I said calmly, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I'm here for Tyler. For Marissa. For that baby. I'm building something now, something Grandma would have been proud of. You're not a part of it. Not anymore." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Emma stepped beside me, radiant in a sundress, one hand gently touching my back. I took a breath. If you want to be part of this family again, it won't be through manipulation, or fear, or paperwork. It'll be through truth, respect, earned trust. He opened his mouth. I raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not asking for a response," I said. "I'm giving you a boundary." And with that, I walked away. Later that afternoon, I watched Tyler cut the cake while Marissa laughed beside him. The Japanese maple at our house would be blooming soon. Life was moving forward, no longer shackled to the past. I didn't win by defeating my father. I won by becoming someone he couldn't control. Buying a home should have been stressful: bidding wars, inspections, hidden mold nightmares. But for us, it felt like liberation in drywall form. We walked through dozens of properties, rejecting anything that felt too polished or too desperate to impress. We wanted something that breathed. We found it in a quiet neighborhood tucked behind a row of sycamores. 3 bedrooms. A backyard with a shed full of rusted tools. Original wood floors that creaked in just the right way. It needed work, but it was ours. And more importantly, it had no ghosts. No one had ever stood in this living room trying to make me feel small. No one had sat at this kitchen table, drilling holes in my self-worth under the guise of just being honest. This house didn't carry the weight of my childhood. It invited something new. We moved in mid-July. Emma painted the office first, her command center, she called it, laughing in paint-splattered overalls. I claimed the sunroom as my writing space. For the first time in years, I actually wrote again. Not just journal entries filled with bitterness, but stories. Fiction. Hopeful ones, even. One night, a week after moving in, we sat on lawn chairs in our empty backyard drinking wine from mugs because we couldn't find the glassware. Emma looked up at the stars and said, "This house is the first place you've never had to perform." She was right. I didn't have to tiptoe, placate, anticipate attacks. I didn't have to shrink to make room for someone else's ego. Still, not everything was smooth. I got a letter in the mail 2 weeks later, postmarked from my father's law firm. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a personal reconciliation proposal. A thick packet outlining suggested steps to restore financial and emotional trust between father and son. He even included bullet points. Emma read it and snorted. Did he really just write that your refusal to collaborate is damaging to the Miller legacy? I tossed it in the shredder without a second thought. But it rattled me more than I admitted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying childhood dinners where my father would berate someone under the guise of advice, where my mom would go mute and distant, and where silence was safer than honesty. I thought about how often I'd normalized that kind of toxicity. At 3 a.m., I padded into the sunroom and opened Grandma Eleanor's last letter again. I'd kept it with me, tucked inside a notebook, worn from rereading. "You are more," she wrote. Protect your future. I whispered it aloud, like a prayer. The next day, I drafted my own letter. Not to my father, but to the scholarship committee we'd been working with. I proposed expanding the program to include a creative resilience workshop for young adults from toxic family systems. A place where they could learn the difference between control and care, obligation and love. Emma read it and cried. That's the legacy, she said. Not the money. This. We mailed the proposal the next day. And that night, sitting beneath our half-assembled bookshelves, I realized something else. I didn't just escape my father. I'd become the man my grandmother believed I could be. Emma and I had always joked that our wedding wasn't really ours. Yes, the photos looked beautiful. Yes, we exchanged vows, kissed under a string of fairy lights, danced to our favorite songs. But the day itself had felt hijacked by my father's performance, the leather portfolio, and the tension that lurked under every polite smile. So one Saturday in late August, we decided to redo it. Just us. We packed a picnic basket, drove 2 hours north to a quiet lake near where Grandma Eleanor used to take me as a kid, and found a secluded clearing near the water's edge. Emma wore a flowing white sundress. I brought a Bluetooth speaker and played the playlist we never got to finish at the reception. There was no officiant, no aisle, no guests, just vows we wrote that morning and hearts still healing but open. I promise, she said, voice shaking with emotion, to remind you that you are not your father's mistakes. You're the man who broke the pattern. I swallowed hard and took her hands. I promised to never confuse peace with silence or love with obedience. I'll always choose you, not out of duty, but out of truth. We cried. We laughed. We kissed under a sky that didn't care about family power struggles or estate plans. And for the first time, our wedding felt real. Afterward, we sat on a blanket by the lake and shared sandwiches, listening to the wind through the trees. Do you think he'll ever stop? Emma asked softly. My father. I thought for a moment. No, but I don't need him to anymore. I told her something I hadn't shared before, that when I was 15, I got into a small car accident. No one was hurt, just a fender bender. I was terrified to call home. But when I finally did, my father didn't ask if I was okay. His first words were, "Do you have any idea what kind of insurance nightmare you've just caused me?" That was my blueprint for love, cost-benefit analysis disguised as concern. Emma rested her head on my shoulder. Then I guess we're building something new. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. Not just about the wedding redo, but about the subtle shifts, the way I no longer braced for my phone to vibrate with a guilt trip, the way Tyler was slowly becoming someone I could trust again, the way I could sit in silence without the fear of being interrogated. We printed a photo from that day by the lake, just a candid selfie, sun behind us, eyes still damp, and framed it above the fireplace. Your real wedding, Tyler said when he visited. I nodded. Yeah, the one we chose. A few weeks later, Emma and I hosted our first dinner party in the new house. Just 6 people, Tyler and Marissa, and Cynthia, Patricia, and an old college friend. No performance. No speeches. Just good food, soft jazz, and the sound of people laughing without agenda. We raised a toast near the end of the night. To Eleanor, I said, and to the freedom she gave us by refusing to let our lives be written by someone else. Glasses clinked. That night, as I stood in the kitchen washing dishes with Emma, she whispered, "You know you're allowed to be happy now, right?" And for the first time, I truly believed her. It was late September when the final ripple came. Patricia called one afternoon, her voice unusually tense. "You're going to want to come in," she said. "Your father filed a claim challenging the legitimacy of Eleanor's trust. He's arguing she wasn't of sound mind when she created it." I felt my stomach drop. "Can he do that?" "Anyone can try," she said. "But it's weak. He doesn't have a case. Still, he filed it, and that means we need to respond. Officially." I felt it immediately, that old dread rising in my throat. The kind that made my palms sweat and my voice crack in middle school whenever I had to speak up at dinner. My father wasn't done. He couldn't accept that I had one. Patricia slid the papers across her desk. "He's hoping to create noise. To delay. To rattle you." I skimmed the legal jargon. It was the same manipulative tactic I'd seen all my life, just in fancier clothes. Buried on page 3 was the most galling part. Mr. Robert Miller asserts that Eleanor Miller may have been unduly influenced by her grandson, Jason R. Miller, due to emotional proximity and mental instability at the time of estate transition. I almost laughed. He's accusing me of manipulating her? Emma didn't laugh. Her jaw tightened. This is cruelty dressed as paperwork. Patricia nodded. It won't hold. But we have to treat it seriously. It'll go in front of a probate judge. 2 weeks later, we sat in a small hearing room downtown. My father didn't even show, his lawyer did. A stiff man in a blue suit who tried to frame me as some emotional opportunist who convinced an aging grandmother to cut her own son out. Patricia decimated him. She presented 3 years of emails, notarized directives, dated bank statements, and, most powerfully, a video recorded 6 months before Eleanor passed. In it, she clearly outlined her wishes, her distrust of Robert, and her intentions for the trust. The judge took one look at it and ruled in our favor. Case dismissed. But it wasn't just the win, it was what came after. As we were leaving, Patricia pulled me aside. "I need to show you something," she said, holding up a different file. This didn't come from the court. It came from Eleanor's personal safe. It was addressed to be opened only if Robert contested her estate. Inside was a second letter. Not like the first, this one wasn't tender. It was cold, focused, surgical. "Robert, if you're reading this, you have proven me right. Again, you cannot stand the idea of someone else having control, especially not someone you believe you created. Jason is not your extension. He is his own man. And this trust? It's my final refusal to let you harm anyone else in my name. I will not let you rewrite the story one more time. Eleanor." I stood there in silence for a long moment. Emma reached for my hand. Patricia looked at me. "She didn't just trust you, Jason. She protected you, even in death." I nodded, too choked up to speak. On the way home, we drove in silence, holding hands over the center console. I thought about how hard Eleanor must have worked to stay one step ahead. How much of her final years were spent building a firewall against her own son. And how lucky I was to have been loved like that. That night, I lit a candle beside the framed photo of us at the lake. Just me and Emma, smiling into the sun. "Thanks for fighting for me, Grandma," I whispered. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It already had. And we were still standing. Fall settled over the neighborhood like a warm exhale. The trees turned gold, the sky softened, and for a few precious weeks, things felt normal. Until Tyler showed up unannounced one Sunday afternoon. He looked different, less jittery, more grounded. But there was a weight in his expression, like he'd come to drop something heavy between us. "I need to tell you something," he said, standing in our doorway. "Can I come in?" Emma hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside. "You're always welcome, as long as it's honest." We sat in the living room. I could already feel a shift in the air, like the past was about to break the surface again. "I've been in therapy," he said. "Really in it. And I realized I've never actually apologized, not for what I did, but for who I was when I did it." He took a breath. "I knew Dad was trying to control you. I didn't care. I wanted out of my own mess so bad. I just let him use me. I didn't think about what it would cost you. I only saw the exit sign." I nodded slowly. "I know." Tyler looked down. "There's more." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased and soft from being carried too long. He handed it to me. "It's from Dad. He gave it to me months ago, back when I first told him I was broke." I unfolded the note. It wasn't long. "Tyler, leverage is everything. Jason may be sentimental, but he's weak. Guilt is your best entry point. Make him feel responsible, and you'll get what you need. Dad." I stared at the paper, every line digging deeper into old wounds. It wasn't just manipulation, it was strategy. Cold, calculated, and handed down like an heirloom. "I carried that note around for a week," Tyler said, thinking maybe he was right. "Maybe you owed me. But then I remembered how Grandma used to talk about you. Like you were the only one who saw through him." I looked up. "Why show me this now?" "Because I want to make sure there's nothing left between us," he said. "No more half-truths. No more poison. If we're going to be brothers again, I want it clean." Emma stood and walked to the kitchen, silent. I could feel the tension in her spine. I folded the note and walked it over to the fireplace. Tyler watched as I lit a match, dropped the note in, and let it burn. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "But I appreciate the truth." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm trying to be better." Emma returned with 3 mugs of coffee. No judgment in her expression, just watchfulness. Like she was waiting to see if Tyler would earn the bridge he was asking for. "Start by being a good dad," she said, placing a mug in front of him. "Break the cycle." He smiled, small and genuine. "That's the plan." As he left later that afternoon, I realized something unexpected. The story wasn't just about escaping our father anymore. It was about deciding who we'd be in his absence. And for the first time, I saw Tyler as more than a threat or a liability. I saw him as someone who was trying. And maybe that was enough. For now, 2 weeks after Tyler's visit, he called me at 1:17 a.m. I woke in a haze, Emma stirring beside me. The screen lit up with his name and a shaky voice on the other end. "Jason," he whispered. "I think Dad bugged my house." I sat up, fully awake now. "What?" Tyler's voice cracked. "It's the baby monitor. Marissa and I were arguing. Nothing serious. And afterward, I heard static. Then I heard him." "What do you mean him?" "My father," he said. His voice came through the monitor. Not live. Like a recording. I was out of bed in seconds. Emma followed me down to the kitchen, where I put Tyler on speaker and asked him to start from the top. He explained that they'd recently gotten a new baby monitor, a gift, supposedly, from our dad. It had audio and video. But last night, long after the monitor should have been silent, it played back a message. "You think you're better than me now? You're nothing without my name. Without my money. That little scholarship fund. It's a vanity project. And Jason? He'll fold. Just give it time." Emma covered her mouth. "He recorded himself?" "What?" "Control," I said. "He wants Tyler to know he's still watching. Still pulling strings, even if it's psychological." I unplugged everything. Tyler said, panicked. "But Marissa's freaked out. She doesn't want him anywhere near the baby now." "Good," Emma said. "She's right." I called Patricia the next morning. She wasn't surprised. "He's escalating," she said. "Not legally, but psychologically. When the courts fail him, he turns to fear. Surveillance. Doubt. Can we prove anything?" I asked. "Possibly. I'll connect you with a security expert who can sweep their home." In the meantime, I drove to Tyler's house with Emma. We brought a replacement monitor, one we bought ourselves, and a few home security devices Patricia recommended. Tyler looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "I thought maybe I was just being paranoid," he admitted. But the voice, it was too real. Marissa held their newborn close. "He is not allowed near us again. Ever." I nodded. "He won't be." While Emma helped Marissa in the kitchen, I pulled Tyler aside. "Why do you think he gave you that monitor?" I asked. Tyler hesitated. "To keep tabs. Maybe even on you. Through me." That sank in like ice. It had never been just about the trust. It was about control. My father didn't care about the money. Not really. He cared about narrative. About being the center of gravity. If he couldn't manipulate me directly, he'd use proximity. Through Tyler, through Marissa, through any doorway left even slightly ajar. That night, I sat in my sunroom staring out into the yard, the Japanese maple swaying in the wind. "He's slipping," I told Emma. "He's desperate." "Which makes him dangerous," she replied. "But also beatable." We decided then, no more waiting for the next move. No more defense. It was time to go on offense. Not with revenge, but with exposure. We reached out to a journalist Emma knew from her work in communications. A writer who specialized in legacy abuse and the weaponization of family systems. "I'm ready to tell my story," I said when we spoke. "But it's not just about my father. It's about what happens when silence becomes inherited." The writer paused. "That's not just a story. That's a reckoning." Exactly. The journalist's name was Alana Chun. Quiet, focused, the kind of person who didn't flinch when you told her hard truths. She met us at a neutral spot, an indie bookstore cafe halfway between our house and the city. She showed up with a recorder, a legal pad, and eyes that said, "You're safe here." We started slow. I told her about the wedding, the leather portfolio, the chilling realization that my father had tried to slide a power of attorney document across the table while pretending it was a gift. She took notes, nodding, rarely interrupting. Then I told her about the trust, the hidden inheritance, and the letter from Eleanor. But when I described the baby monitor incident, her pen froze. "He planted a recording device in a monitor gifted to his pregnant son," she said. "Yes. Has anyone gone to the police?" I shook my head. "No solid proof yet. Just audio. He's careful. Always one step behind the line, never quite over it." Alana leaned in. "Jason, this isn't just a story about money. It's about generational coercion, inheritance manipulation, psychological warfare." "Exactly," Emma said. "He weaponizes love, guilt, tradition. He makes you feel crazy for noticing the trap." Alana asked if she could speak to Tyler. He agreed, nervously, but after a long call, he signed off on being included, anonymously at first. Marissa, too. The article would be published under the title, Strings and Sons, When Family Legacy Becomes a Weapon. Emma and I didn't tell many people. We knew what would happen when it dropped. My father lived off reputation. He curated it like a museum exhibit. A public expose would hit him where he truly lived. Perception. The piece went live a week later. Front page on the magazine's site. Thousands of shares within 24 hours. The comments were overwhelming, people thanking me, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, or simply saying, I thought I was alone. We watched the fire spread from our living room, coffee in hand, hearts pounding. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Jason, it's your father. You've made your point. You've poisoned my name. I hope you're proud. But know this, legacies don't die from exposure. They die when sons forget who they are. Click. Emma deleted it without asking. Let him scream into the void. Tyler called, too. I read it 3 times, he said. I didn't know how much I needed someone else to say it out loud. Aunt Cynthia texted me simply, Eleanor would be proud. Then came the email from a woman named Lorraine. I knew your father. Years ago. I was a client of his. He manipulated me out of my share of an inheritance after my divorce. I never had the nerve to fight it. But your article. I think I'm ready now. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my freedom anymore. It was about lighting torches for others still lost in the dark. We weren't just breaking a cycle. We were exposing the machine that kept it running. December arrived with a hush. Snow blanketed the neighborhood, and for once, everything felt still, not just the world outside, but the world inside me. Emma and I had planned a quiet Christmas. No extended family. Just us, Tyler, Marissa, and the baby, plus Aunt Cynthia, who insisted on bringing a vat of her famous mulled wine. We hung lights on the porch, set out candles in the windows, and baked Eleanor's old shortbread recipe from a card stained with time. It was the kind of holiday I'd always imagined but never experienced, free from scrutiny, obligation, or the low-grade dread of being ambushed with guilt. But 3 days before Christmas, a letter arrived. No return address, no stamp, just a cream envelope slid under our front door sometime in the night. Inside was a single-typed page. From my father. Jason. Congratulations. You've destroyed me. You've taken my reputation, my relationships, and now my silence. I hope the version of me you've created brings you peace, because the real me is gone. And maybe that's what you wanted all along. I won't contact you again. I won't respond if you try. The game is over. You win. But don't mistake that for forgiveness. RM. I stared at the paper, emotionless. Emma read it and raised an eyebrow. He always has to be the martyr, doesn't he? Even in surrender, he needs control, I murmured. Tyler came by later that afternoon and read the letter too. His reaction surprised me. He's bluffing, he said. He's not done. He just knows the public angle is off limits now. You think he'll come back? Tyler shrugged. Maybe not to you. But he'll find someone else to orbit. He always does. The letter didn't make me angry. It didn't even hurt. It felt small. Like a final act in a one-man play no one was watching anymore. We burned it in the fireplace that night. No drama. Just silence and sparks. And then, we turned our focus back to something real. Marissa arrived the next day with the baby bundled in a red knit hat. Aunt Cynthia brought cinnamon rolls and Tyler handled the eggnog, which he proudly made without a single Google search. We played charades, watched old Christmas movies, and exchanged handmade gifts. No one performed. No one guilt-tripped. No one said, you should really call him. Instead, we passed the baby around like a torch in the dark, laughing, teary-eyed, hopeful. At one point, Emma handed me a wrapped envelope. Inside was a small card, Jason's Legacy Fund, seed donation, $5,000. From the scholarship account, she said, I want you to be the one to decide where it grows next. I looked at her, stunned. You built this, she said, brick by brick, scar by scar. Later that night, after everyone had gone, we stood by the fireplace, sipping wine and watching the flames. Do you think he meant it? I asked. That he's really gone? Emma was quiet for a moment. Maybe. But even if he's not, it doesn't matter. Why? She looked up at me, eyes warm and fierce. Because he can't touch what you've built anymore. And standing there, surrounded by laughter still echoing in the walls, by warmth that no longer came with a price, I finally believed her. January brought quiet. The kind of silence that didn't feel threatening, but earned. Emma returned to her projects. I picked up a few tutoring gigs at the local college and spent my mornings in the sunroom. watching the frost melt from the windows as I wrote. Even Tyler had settled into something like stability. He was working part-time at a nonprofit, trying to redefine what success looked like. Then Patricia called. "Jason, I found something," she said. "Something Eleanor left for you." It was in a secondary safety deposit box we just got clearance to open. It was under a backup trust designation. I thought everything had been accounted for. The idea that there was more, a loose thread, shook me in a way I didn't expect. Emma came with me. We met Patricia at the bank, and the three of us entered the private viewing room. Inside a small gray box sat a thick envelope, slightly yellowed, with my name written in Eleanor's handwriting. No address, no date, just my name. I opened it slowly. Inside was another letter, but this one wasn't instructional or warning. It was confessional. "Jason, there are things I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want to cloud your memories with mine. Your father wasn't always like this. Once, he was just a boy with big eyes and gentle hands. But power is like water, it takes the shape of whatever holds it. And for him, that shape became fear. He saw vulnerability as weakness. He saw love as leverage. Somewhere along the way, he lost the plot. I tried to help him. Too many times. I enabled more than I should have, hoping he'd come back to himself. He never did. You're the course correction, Jason. You're the moment the story changed. I know it hurts. I know it's heavy. But this is the weight of breaking the chain. I love you. I believe in you. Keep choosing truth, even when it costs. Eleanor." I sat there in silence. Emma placed her hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. "She wanted you to know the full picture," Patricia said quietly. "Not just what he became, but who he was, and who you could be." There was something else in the envelope, an old photograph. Black and white, edges soft with time. My father, maybe 8 years old, sitting beside Eleanor on a park bench. He was laughing. Freely. Eyes crinkled, arms flung around her like she was his whole world. It gutted me. Not because I pitied him, but because I finally saw the boy he once was, the one she tried to save, and the man he chose to become. "I'm not him," I said aloud. "No," Emma whispered. "You never were." That night, we framed the photo not to honor him, but to honor her effort, her hope, her fight. It sat on a shelf beside the framed letter from Eleanor's estate file and the certificate from the first scholarship we awarded. The legacy wasn't money. It wasn't power. It was memory, reshaped by truth. And it was mine now. I didn't expect to see him again. But life has a strange way of testing whether your healing is real or just rehearsed. It happened at the grocery store, of all places. I was in the produce aisle, comparing sweet potatoes like a man with real problems, when I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. I looked up, and there he was. My father. He hadn't seen me yet. He was examining a bundle of asparagus with the same clinical detachment he used to apply to people. I froze, not out of fear, but surprise. The man in front of me didn't look powerful anymore. He looked tired, smaller, like gravity had been quietly dragging him down for years. Then he looked up and saw me. We locked eyes. There was no mask on his face, no smirk, no disdain. Just a flat recognition. He didn't approach. Neither did I. We stood there for a full 10 seconds, the hum of fluorescent lights and distant cart wheels filling the space between us. Then, without a word, he turned his cart and walked away. I didn't flinch. I didn't chase after him. I didn't run. I just stood there, breathing. Emma was waiting at home. I told her what happened as I unloaded the groceries. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. "Lighter." She smiled. "Then that's the win." That evening, we sat on the porch, hot drinks in hand, the air crisp with the first whispers of spring. We watched the Japanese maple sway gently in the wind. It had grown fuller now, its branches stretching with quiet confidence. I thought about the younger version of myself. The boy who walked on eggshells, who mistook obedience for love, who buried his instincts just to keep the peace. He would have chased his father in that aisle, or ducked away. But the man I'd become didn't have to react. I'd already won the battle where it counted, inside. A letter came the next week from a woman in Chicago, another reader of the article. Her son had been disinherited by a controlling father. She said our story gave her the courage to rewrite her own will and protect what little she had for the people who truly deserved it. Then another letter. Then 10 more. The ripple had become a wave. Emma created a website, a simple landing page with resources, book recommendations, and a message from me about reclaiming narrative from toxic legacy. We called it Unwritten Inheritance. The homepage read, "You don't have to carry what they handed you. Some legacies are meant to be broken. We were invited to speak at a university panel on family systems and financial autonomy. It wasn't glamorous, just a group of grad students and social workers, but the energy in that room? Electric. Afterward, a student approached me and said, "My dad always said I was weak for going no contact. After hearing you, I think I was just brave." I nodded, overwhelmed. "You are." On the drive home, Emma said, "You know, you never really wanted revenge. You just wanted truth. And now," she smiled, "now you're giving it away." 3 months later, I got a call from Patricia that caught me off guard. "There's one more document," she said. "Something your grandmother added to her file but requested we delay reading until at least a year after her passing. A second will." My heart paused. "What do you mean a second will?" "She called it the real one," Patricia explained. "Not in terms of legality, the trust already covered the assets. But this one, it's personal. Symbolic. She wanted you, and only you, to hear it." We scheduled the meeting for a Saturday. Just me, Emma, Patricia, and Aunt Cynthia, whom Eleanor had named as the witness to its drafting. Patricia opened a small file and pulled out a handwritten letter folded inside an official will form. It had no legal power, but it had something more important, her voice. She began reading. "This is the will of Eleanor May Miller. I leave my pearls to Marissa because every woman deserves to feel strong and beautiful at the same time. I leave my fountain pen to Patricia, who knew when to hold her tongue and when to draw her sword. I leave the recipe box to Cynthia, even though I know she'll add too much cinnamon. To Tyler, I leave my forgiveness. He disappointed me, but I never stopped believing he could change. I see him trying now, and that's enough for me. To Robert, I leave nothing. Not out of spite, but out of truth. You were loved more than you deserved, and it was never enough. You will always think this is about money. It's not. It's about protection. I won't let you haunt them anymore. And to Jason, I leave everything you already have. Strength. Integrity. The courage to break cycles I was too afraid to name. You are my legacy. Everything else is noise. Eleanor." Patricia's voice cracked on the last line. I sat in stunned silence. Emma squeezed my hand. Cynthia wiped a tear. It wasn't the bequeathing of property. It was something deeper. It was an emotional map of our family's failures and her final act of healing, naming them, drawing lines, and leaving no room for misinterpretation. She wanted to be clear, Patricia said. Not about money, but about meaning. I kept the letter, framed it, hung it in my office across from the sunroom window, where the morning light always found it. Tyler visited later that week. When I read him his section, he didn't speak for a full minute. "She left me forgiveness," he said quietly. "She believed in you," I said, "even when she didn't trust you yet." He nodded, emotional. "Then I better earn it." That week, we added a new category to the Unwritten Inheritance website, Stories from Readers. We called it the Real Will Project, a space for people to write the wills they wish they had received. Wills that pass down honesty, boundaries, resilience. Within a week, submissions flooded in. I leave my daughter the courage to ignore her father's shame. I leave my son the right to walk away. I leave my sister the truth. I never hated you. I was just surviving. Some were long. Some were single lines. All of them were powerful. Emma looked at me one night as we read through the new entries. "You know this is bigger than us now, right?" I nodded. It always was. We just finally gave it a voice. The voicemail came on a Tuesday. "Jason, it's Robert. Your father. I know you said you didn't want contact, and I've respected that. But I'm not well. I'm at St. Augustine Hospice. Room 314. Do what you want with this." Emma found me in the kitchen, frozen with my phone still in my hand. "You okay?" she asked softly. I wasn't, but I nodded. "I think I need to see him." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Then I'm going with you." The drive was quiet. Not tense, not dreading. Just quiet, like the space between heartbeats. I didn't know what I wanted from the visit. Closure? Maybe. Just one final thread to untangle before I left it all behind for good. St. Augustine was sterile, like most places that house the dying. We checked in, walked the fluorescent-lit hallways, and stopped in front of room 314. He was thinner, paler. His once imposing posture had crumpled inward, but the eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, aware. "You came," he said. I did. Emma stayed by the door, arms crossed, silent but present. My anchor. He reached for the glass of water beside his bed, his hand trembling slightly. "I didn't lie about being sick," he said. "It's real this time. Pancreatic. Stage 4. I didn't react. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm not here to apologize either. He studied me, maybe trying to gauge how much of his script I was willing to read from. You wrote that article, he said flatly. You turned me into a villain. You handed me the ink, I replied. All I did was stop erasing. He didn't argue. That silence was new. I was trying to protect what I built, he murmured. You weren't building, I said. You were hoarding. Control, money, attention, and anyone who didn't bow became a threat. For a moment, his eyes glistened, but he blinked it away. I failed you, he said. But you made it. Without me. I swallowed hard. I didn't need you to succeed. I needed you to be decent. And when you couldn't, I learned how to survive without you. He looked toward the window. The sun was setting, casting long gold streaks across the floor. I think about Eleanor a lot, he said quietly. She gave up on me. No, I said. She just stopped letting you hurt her. Silence again. Then something strange happened. He reached under the blanket and pulled out a small item, his wedding band. He held it out. This belonged to a different man, he said. Maybe you'll be better with it than I was. I didn't take it. I already am, I said. But you can keep that. Emma stepped forward then, placing a hand on my shoulder. Let's go. We turned to leave. At the door, I paused. I forgive you, I said. Not for you. For me. And then we walked out. In the car, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Was that what you needed? Emma asked. I nodded. Yeah. I didn't get an apology. But I gave myself the ending. The email came on a Sunday morning, just after sunrise. Tyler and Marissa had welcomed their daughter, Eleanor Rose Miller. She's perfect, the message read. She has your grandmother's eyes. Emma and I arrived at the hospital by noon. The room was filled with soft light and softer voices. Tyler looked like he hadn't slept, but he was glowing. Marissa sat in the hospital bed holding the baby close, her expression somewhere between awe and exhaustion. When I held Eleanor Rose for the first time, something inside me broke open, gently. A warmth spread through my chest, a kind of peace I hadn't known existed. She was tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket, eyes fluttering as if deciding whether this world was worth keeping her eyes open for. She's safe now, I whispered. You're never going to have to unlearn what we did. Tyler watched from the foot of the bed, visibly emotional. I want her to grow up knowing where she came from, he said. But only the parts that won't crush her. You'll figure it out, I said. The fact that you're asking means you're already halfway there. We stayed for hours. Emma brought coffee. Marissa dozed while Emma and I took turns cradling the baby. At one point, Tyler leaned in and whispered, I read your Eleanor project letters. Every one of them. You're doing more than you know. The next week, we updated the unwritten inheritance site to include a section titled Beginnings, a space for people to share stories of what they're building after the break. Recovery, redemption, rebirth. Submissions poured in. I cut ties with my mother after years of gaslighting. Now I run a women's shelter. My father disowned me when I came out. Now I'm marrying the love of my life in spring. I lost my inheritance for saying no. I found my worth anyway. Emma curated them into a digital anthology titled Hearts That Didn't Stay Broken. We published it with donations going toward trauma-informed family therapy grants. Within the month, we funded the first 5. Later that fall, I was asked to speak at a conference on generational trauma and inheritance ethics. I stood on stage in front of a few hundred people and told the story, not just of my father, or Eleanor, or the trust, but of what came after. Of Tyler's change. Of our real wedding. Of Eleanor Rose, named for a woman who taught us that legacy is something you create, not something you obey. I ended my talk with this. You don't have to protect the system that hurt you. You're allowed to walk away. And when you do, there's something waiting on the other side, not just healing, but possibility. The room stood, not clapping like an audience, but like people rising for something sacred. Afterward, a woman came up to me crying and said, You gave language to something I've carried alone for years. That's when it hit me. Eleanor hadn't just protected me. She'd planted a story that would outlive her. And now I was the one planting new seeds. It was a year to the day since I first held the leather portfolio. Emma and I stood in the backyard beneath the now blooming Japanese maple, its red leaves glowing in the early spring light. Tyler, Marissa, and baby Eleanor had joined us for a quiet brunch. No speeches, no toasts. Just family, chosen and earned. The tree had grown taller, thicker, like it had taken root in the truth we planted that year. We'd brought out a small wooden box, handmade. simple, and lined with velvet. Inside were a few items we were ready to bury beneath the tree, symbolic weight we no longer needed to carry. Emma placed the wedding photo from the first ceremony, the one we never claimed as ours. A reminder, she said, that not everything wrapped in celebration is meant to be kept. Tyler placed the burned corner of his father's letter, the one I'd tossed into the fireplace but he'd secretly fished out and kept, folded in his wallet. I don't need to hold on to the worst of him to remember the best of me, he said. And I placed the last item, a photo of my father as a child, the one from Eleanor's safe deposit box. I had looked at it often this past year, trying to reconcile the boy who smiled so openly with the man who wielded love like a ledger. I forgive him, I said aloud. Not because he earned it, but because I don't want him inside me anymore. We covered the box in soil together. It wasn't a funeral. It was a planting. Later, as the sun dipped low, I watched little Eleanor Rose toddling barefoot on the grass, her laughter like wind chimes in summer. Tyler sat beside me on the deck. I used to think legacy was about names on buildings or plaques on benches, he said. But it's this, isn't it? I nodded. It's what we choose to pass down or not. He looked at the tree. She'll never know him. She won't have to. That night, after everyone had left and the dishes were done, Emma and I curled up in the sunroom, the same one where this whole story had started unfolding. The letter from Eleanor still hung on the wall. The framed photo of our second wedding was beside it. But now, there was something new, drawings sent in from children of readers around the world, whose parents had written their own, real wills. I never thought this would become something, I said. Emma smiled. It didn't. You did. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering blossoms from the maple across the lawn like soft confetti. I closed my eyes and breathed it all in peace, love, the memory of a grandmother who fought for a better ending, and the family we were building from ashes. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, the most powerful inheritance is freedom. And this time, it was finally ours.